Hello shearers, this is Kate Humble here at Humble by Nature. I'm really sad that you can't be here, but never fear. Farmer Tim is ready to give you step-by-step instructions on how to shear, and hopefully, given that none of you will have had a haircut for 3 months, if you haven't got any sheep to practice on, you can do it to each other. I think there's no doubt that these girls are ready to shear.
Yeah, looking like it. They're losing a bit already, so they're what we call opening up now. So I'm guessing the wool's risen and started to rise anyway. So you can see by. How
do you tell that it has risen? How do you tell that they are ready to shear?
Well, they've started to lose a bit of wool around the neck, and if they lift their chins up, you can see the wool starting to fall away from the neck.
Yeah. And
then the belly wool, you can see there, most of her belly wool is gone.
Yeah.
Which is another sign. So that's what we like to see as a shearer. We like to see not much wool on the belly and the neck's opening up.
So if you try and shear them too early, what happens?
Well, until the wool's risen, you can't get under it, so it physically starts to release from the skin.
Okay.
So the fleece then is only held on by a small amount of fibres. So when you tip them over, more often than not, you can see a gap between the main fleece and the skin.
So it has literally risen away from the skin?
Yeah.
Now obviously these are ewes because they've got lambs, they've got their babies with them. You're not going to shear the lambs?
No, we don't tend to shear the lambs. Some people shear the lambs later on in the summer just because they say they grow better. So they'll go and they'll be less hot in the summer. They'll grow and they'll eat more, and it's because they're less hot and eat more to compensate for the loss of the wool as well. So we don't tend to shear the lambs.
Okay, well I'll let you get started. Should we talk about kit first of all?
Set the machine up first.
Yeah.
So we've got our mains electric shearing machine, the all singing, all dancing contractor's machine. There's a variation on this, so this is more a modern take on the old-fashioned flexi drive. There is a solid drop as they call it, but I'm too old to be using one of those. I learned on a flexi drive, so I'm sticking to it. And then what we call our hand piece then. So this is the bit that our cutter's attached to. So this takes what we call the comb and the cutter. So the comb is the big one, and then the cutter's the small one. And if you see on the comb, I don't know if you can see the light shining on that. So the shiny side and the dull side. So the shiny side is the sharp side, and the same with the cutter. The dirty dull side there, and then the sharp shiny edges. So the two shiny sharp bits go together. Believe it or not, some people have ended up putting the comb and cutter back to front, and you've got two beveled surfaces. So there's no way the wool is going to be cut between the two beveled surfaces. So we've got two really flat ground surfaces, and the comb is fixed to the back of the handpiece. The cutter then is rattled back and forth by the handpiece, and as the fibres go through the comb, the cutter cuts them off. So it's the flat, shiny, sharp edges go together. So the cutter then slides under what we call the chicken's feet, and there are two little prongs on the end of the chicken's feet that latch into, I'll just show you there, so latch into the holes on the tips. Cutter slides in, locate those little pins, so that keeps the cutter in place. The very tip of the comb is beveled, so slopes away, so it's ground flat to roughly the tip of the screwdriver. So I don't know if you can see there, we need to leave a gap between the tip of the cutter, which is wiggling back and forth, and the edge of the ground edge. So we give it a bit what we call lead, and then we tension it till it'll just about go back and forth. So I'm just putting my thumb on the drive cog at the back, so I'm just able to make the cutter go back and forth with pressure of my thumb on the back cog. So that's enough tension there now to start. So we need a little bit of lubrication to start, just a bit of new oil, and then just to make sure everything's up and running before we catch a sheep.
So obviously you're going to be shearing 300 ewes or so.
Yeah.
For people who, maybe only have a handful of ewes, they're not going to need as heavy duty equipment as this, are they?
No, there's lots of other things about. You've got battery clippers, similar to that, with a battery that fits on it, and you don't have all this then. With your battery clippers, if your sheep's a bit wriggly and you end up shuffling around, you can then just move around the shed a bit, and it gives you a lot more flexibility. There's also the old-fashioned hand shears. Not many people use those these days.
If people do want to use hand shears, because some people love the idea of that very purist, low-tech approach. Is it a nightmare? Is it rather wonderful shearing with hand shears?
I wouldn't say it's a nightmare. I guess if you're practiced in that, there are people that will do 250 to 300 sheep in a day with hand shears. It's something that is difficult on the hands if you're not doing it on a regular basis. It's quite cool because it's quiet. You don't get all the rattling and the vibrations of this thing, and you can shear a sheep wherever you like, out in the middle of the field if you fancy. It's a nice old thing. There's still some people that still use them, and not many, but some people still use them. And it's doable as long as the machine, as long as the shears are sharp. And there's a modern version of the old-fashioned sheep shears too. So it's like a big scissors, but it's basically the same thing. It is harder, and it's easier to cut a sheep with a traditional hand shears, because you can get those blades close on the skin, pinch the skin up and take a lump of skin off, whereas the comb on this, as long as you've got the sheep in the right place and the skin tight, then the comb will iron out the wrinkles and stop you cutting it. I'm not saying it stops you cutting all the time. We do, unfortunately, occasionally have a little nick here and there, but more often than not, you'll cut less with this than the old-fashioned hand shears, especially beginners.